This is Through the Lens Perspective Part 2, Exploring Social Perspective. Yesterday, you looked at a presentation about visual perspective and how changing the angle that you look at something changes the way you perceive the image. From a simple, like, one-point perspective to fish eyes and bird's eyes and all sorts of different sorts of physical views. Now we're going to look at social perspective and more psychological and social views. So social perspective is an attitude or point of view towards an object, idea, person, place, thing, etc., anything. And it can be that of an individual or a group or a culture. And as you look at the images, think about what kind of a perspective the photographer is putting across with their image. For example, this image is obviously a staged image. It's set up. And think about what the people have on their heads. They don't have hair. They have something else. And what is done with that? Where do you see that symbol before? How does that function in our society? And what is the photographer saying about our society? So we need to get a little high-brained here and talk about some philosophy, because that plays a huge deal with social perspective and how it's changing. Philosophy itself is cultural thought. It's what culture and society thinks as a whole and identifies with. For example, in our society, our buildings and building materials and furnishings, etc., tend to be rectangles and squares because they come from ancient Greece, and it's just always been that way. Okay, our current culture, though, is a blend of three philosophies: modernism, postmodernism, and metamodernism. And it all has to do with perspectives on truth and how what you think is true and how truth is communicated. So, explaining. Modernism was the dominant philosophy of most of the 1900s. And it was a belief in absolutes. So the key idea is that there are absolute truths about things. Everything is either right or wrong, good or bad, true or false. There's no middle ground. There's no questions allowed. It is what it is. This is right. It's always right. It doesn't matter. This is wrong. It's always wrong. It doesn't matter. These are the good guys. They're always the good guys. These are the bad guys. They're always the bad guys. That kind of really strict and structured, more inflexible thinking. It creates kind of a simpler world because you have very clear lines, but it doesn't allow for flux. So when you think of modernism, think of opposite cats. Postmodernism it's been around for a while, but then it started getting dominant in the 70s. And the core belief is the opposite of modernism, is that nothing is true. Question everything. Everything is false because it all depends on your personal perspective and experience of it. So not actually what happened, but what you think happened, what you believe happened. It's just gray. There isn't any true story to things. It's just everything is a gray area. There's no right, no wrong. There's just, well, maybe ifs. Or a gray cat. And now metamodernism, which is what we are shifting to currently, it's new. And that thought is that truth depends upon your context. It depends upon the circumstances. And only when all of the different contexts are considered do you discover the real truth. So in other words, the truth does exist, but you have to consider it from all different sides. because pretty much everybody is a little bit right and a little bit wrong. And you end up with a calico cat. Okay? Alright, so perspective as a lens. When we talk about viewing something through a lens, which is talked about in when you get to like history class and things like that, you might talk about viewing history through the lens of Native Americans or history through the lens of women or what have you. But you're looking at things from a different mindset than whatever yours may be. And so it's kind of putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding their experience of what happened. Because just like the cartoon, it may look right to me and it's this, but it's the opposite to you, and that's also right. It just depends upon our perspective. And that's important with photojournalism, because photojournalism is both documentary photography and persuasive photography. It shows you what's happened from the perspective of a photographer. And some of these images are powerful enough to become part of history. They actually create history. But are they really true? Is it, when you look at a photograph, and you probably have seen this one before in your history books and whatnot, it's a very famous photograph during the Dust Bowl era by Dorothea Lange. And is that experience that you're seeing of this very tired and sad-looking woman and her kids that are hiding their faces, there's a baby, and everybody's dirty, was that the experience of everybody or just this one person? Or did the photographer set it up? Did the photographer tell her to look sad? Or is it the truth? Is that really just a bit of street photography, moment in time, captured exactly what was happening? You have to question. And you have to remember that everything you see is from one person's perspective. So, in order to show different perspectives, photographers have to look at the subject, the thought, the concept, the whatever's happening through different lenses. And we're talking, again, about mindset lenses, metaphorical lenses, not the equipment lenses. They have to photograph their subject so it communicates a viewpoint. But in theory, photojournalists are to remain neutral. Their job is also to tell a story and create a reaction, but they're not supposed to interfere. And that can be a very difficult thing because they can be documenting absolutely horrific events, but they're not supposed to save the person whose hair on fire or, pull somebody who's drowning out from the water. Some of them do, some of them don't. Now, think back to look at the picture on the right. Dan Eldon, who we talked about in the sketchbook discovery presentations, he was a photojournalist, and this is one of the photos that he took from Somalia. What story does it tell? You look at it and you might assume instantly some things and come to conclusions, but there's always another side. So push yourself. What do you think the other side of the story is? Why is the soldier so carefully searching that little boy? What has that little boy done? Or what does the soldier think he might do? Think about it. And this is an illustration of different perspectives of one subject put forth by different photographers. And think about what they're communicating and what your reaction is. These are all pictures of homeless people. You have a Twitter picture. It was a trend for a while of taking pictures with homeless people who were not aware that their picture was being taken. You have a color photograph of a homeless person at the top that is showing, think about her expression, think about the marks on her body. What do you think her story is? Why are all the newspapers there? And then another photograph in black and white of a homeless man at the bottom and his dog. What kind of reactions do these three pictures trigger in you? And be honest with yourself. Don't think that you need to think one way or another, but just think about it. Social perspective in social media is very, very important because social media is image driven, and the images that are presented are that of the photographer. A lot of people do their own videos of photography, and some of it is very sophisticated and complicated. And when you have one of these images that reinforce social perspectives that enough people agree upon, that becomes a trend. And then that photographer gains followers, and that in turn spreads that perspective all around like butter. And whatever their subject is, that's how influencers work. That's why they're influencers. They have that power through their photographs and through their lifestyle that they promote to enforce their perspective, whether it's a save the whales perspective, whether it's a eat only green things perspective, or in this case, follow my tutorials and be beautiful and blonde-haired and blue-eyed like me. Over 3 million subscribers, over 1 million followers. People are responding to something she is doing. So your exercise is what's really going on. And you're going to put this in Classroom. I want you to search and pick out one of the trending ideas in social media photography. You can either search it on the computer or just look through something like Instagram, Snapchat. What are people using as their images? What's hot right now? Is it that strawberry dress? Or what is it? Choose a photo that fits that trend. It could be a serious photo. It could be a silly photo, a trendy photo, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then think about what that trend is really about. Is it self-esteem? And, thinking that if you have strawberry dress, you will instantly be a pretty princess. Or is it about pride and being sure that you are right and taking pride in what you do? Is it about justice or shock value, whatever? But why is that trend popular? And then what is the photographer's perspective on it? Okay? And here we have a very different and awesome perspective of a cat. A sleeping cat. He looks like he's levitating. Alright? So that's what you need to do. These are big thoughts to think about really hard, and then find that trending photo and try to figure out what it's really about and what specifically that photographer's perspective is on it. Okay? Not easy, but you can do it.